Well, it's a great privilege to be back at Christendom. I came here with my son Julian today, who's standing over there, trying to make sure that assassins don't break in. He's a class of '07 from Christendom, and he said it was probably one of the greatest experiences of his life to attend college here. And he now teaches at Chesterton Academy, and I'm very pleased that our very first headmaster at Chesterton Academy is here tonight, John Dijak. Where are you, John? There you are. He was the headmaster over at Chelsea Academy until the bishops just tagged him to be the education czar or something for the Catholic Church in America. Yeah. But they couldn't have gotten a better guy, and we're just absolutely pleased to have John in that position. But when we started the first school 17 years ago with 10 kids around one table, the 10 most miserable-looking kids you've ever seen, we didn't realize that we had set off a bomb that day because with over 60 schools around the country, 9 other countries now, there'll be probably 90 schools within the next 2 years. So we don't, and this is all in spite of our efforts. Yeah, that's. So. And I'm also pleased that some of Julian's old classmates are here who apparently never graduated. Adam Wilson's here after how many years you've been here? They haven't let you out yet, and Sam Phillips over there, they won't ever give him a degree either. He comes back year after year. It's a great system. Well, okay, let's start out by talking about ugliness. One of the chief characteristics of the modern world is its ugliness. The only beauty created by the modern world is in the wrong places, in shallow and ephemeral things, not in the permanent things. Our modern churches are not beautiful, with, of course, an exception in a building I saw on campus earlier today. Our modern homes are not beautiful, neither are our businesses. They're only functional, and sometimes they're not even functional. Ugliness gets even in the way of the purpose of things, because one of the purposes of things is to be beautiful. Wherever there are happy men, they will build beautiful things. That's a line from Chesterton. The modern world is ugly because we are unhappy. The modern world is ugly because we do not love the modern world. Men do not produce art in order to be joyful, says Chesterton. They are joyful and therefore they produce art. Men do not dance in order to be happy. They are happy and then they dance. Art is not the mother but the child of beauty. And we who are mature and wicked have constantly to be reminded that beauty is beauty, that kindness is kindness, that courage is lovable, and that lilies are white. And when I first started working on this talk several years ago, I realized that there's just too much to say. Or rather, there's too much that Chesterton said about beauty. So I had to figure out what not to say. Sort of like the way you make a sculpture. You have to take away the parts that are not the sculpture. And that's why I started working on this talk so long ago, trying to figure out what I wasn't going to let Chesterton say at this event this evening, because all I'm going to say is what Chesterton said. You certainly didn't come to hear me talk. But much of what I'm going to say, which is all from Chesterton, you've probably never heard before. Because most of Chesterton's quotes you haven't heard before. You've heard a few of them. You've heard good things like the Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It's been found difficult and left untried. Or you've heard angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. And that one that's on your bumper sticker, if there were no God, there would be no atheists. To think about it for a little while. Now, Sam is just starting to get it right now. So I get it, yeah. Oh, yeah, I get it. But you've only heard just a minute percentage of what Chesterton said. He's not only one of the most prolific writers who ever lived, over 8,000 literary essays. 8,000, by the way. 8,000. If you wrote an essay a day without taking Sundays off, it would take you 22 years to write 8,000 essays. And then you can start in on your Father Brown stories after that. And that book on Thomas Aquinas that you've been wanting to write. But he's also one of the most quotable. So it'd be a waste of my time and yours to stand here and not quote Chesterton. So that's what I'm going to do. So let's start with the whole thing. Beauty is beauty. And you can't talk about beauty without talking about art. Chesterton says a work of art is like a prayer. It's reaching out to God. In our time, we find a great deal of religion in art. But in former times, we found a great deal of art in religion. Art was the handmaiden of religion. Art served religion. Religion was the orthodoxy of those days, and art has become the orthodoxy of our days. In the old days, they permitted art and literature because they glorified God. Now we permit religion to be part of art, if it doesn't offend too much. All art, says Chesterton, is a thing of glimpses. But all art evokes wonder. But he says there are two senses in which the artist may work to awaken wonder. One is the basest and most vulgarest kind of art, and the other is the highest and noblest kind of art. The former is meant to make us wonder at the artist. The latter is to make us wonder at the world. If the art points to the artist, it fails as art. It's supposed to point to something beyond itself. And every artist knows that in his heart, he really scorns art as compared to the greatness of God and men. And of course, there are as this weekend, we're going to be exploring many different forms of art. Each type of art has its own psychological effect, and it differs in the impression that it makes on us from one kind to the other. The movie is not the novel. The novel is not a painting. The painting is not a sculpture. And the sculpture is not a song. As Chesterton says, you can't play the Venus de Milo on the trombone. And I suppose neither can the Venus de Milo play the trombone, now that you bring that up. Chesterton himself was accomplished in every literary genre there was. And he wrote an amazingly wide body of work on art itself and all different forms of art. But I think what's most interesting is the two forms of art that he wrote about almost more profoundly than any other art forms were the two that he is least associated with. I should have said with which he is least associated. But Chesterton does say that sometimes a preposition is the best thing to end a sentence with. And those two art forms are music and dance. Chesterton himself had a tin ear. He sang loudly and off-key. When he was asked to give his opinion of the Salvation Army, because he was told, Salvation Army, they're they do good things. They have good ideas, but they just go about it the wrong way. Chesterton says, no, they go about it exactly the right way. It's their ideas that are all wrong. He liked the loud brass bands. But what he says about music is that music is beauty in solution, pure beauty. Music is abstract, but Chesterton describes beauty as a fact, and harmony is a relation between the facts. And then he talked about dancing. Now you have to understand, G.K. Chesterton described himself as the politest man in all of England because he could stand up on a bus and offer his seat to 3 women at one time. He said that he enjoyed himself more than other people because there's such a lot of me having a good time at once. He said the thin monks were holy, but the fat monks were happy. And so for him to be talking about dance does require a certain juxtaposition of the brain. You can't picture a 300-pound man dancing. You shouldn't picture. And I, of course, am a former Baptist. I mean, the main reason I became a Catholic was so that I could smoke and drink and play poker. But I'm not sure that the Baptists weren't right about dancing. I still think it might be a vertical expression of a horizontal idea. But Chesterton, what he described dancing, he says it's pure and absolute beauty that can only be achieved by dancing. And when he talks about it, he said, and this is going to be a long passage, so this is where you can start relaxing and closing your eyes. Dante makes the very heavens dance in the last pages of the Paradiso, sweeping the sky with swaying and spinning ballets of angels and spirits. The symbol's very appropriate. It's appropriate not because the dance stands for disorder, but because it stands for order. The dance is, in its nature, a rhythmic and recurrent thing, returning upon itself, and was therefore a perfectly correct and orthodox type of medieval moral theology. And it marks the whole difference between medieval life and modern life. There was a break in history between the medieval and the modern age, and before that break, life was conceived as a dance. And after that time, life was conceived as a race. Medieval morality is full of the idea that one thing must balance another, that each stood on one side or the other of something that was in the middle, something that remained in the middle. There might be any amount of movement, but it was a movement round this central thing, perpetually altering the attitudes, but perpetually preserving the balance. The virtues were like children going round the mulberry bush, only the mulberry bush was the burning bush, which is the symbol of the incarnation. And now, since that break in history, the dance has turned into a race. That is, the dancers lose their balance and only recover it by running towards some object or alleged object, not an object within their circle or in their possession, but an object which they do not yet possess, a flying object, a disappearing object, perhaps a disappointing object. One is rhythmic and recurrent movement because there's a known center, while the other is a progressive movement because there's an unknown goal. The latter has produced all that we call progress. The former produced what the medievals meant by order, but it was the lively order of a dance. The key to beauty, just as the key to dancing and all art, most especially dance, is balance. The dancer is always keeping her balance. As Chesterton says, there's many angles at which one falls. There's only one angle at which one stands. And so he says that beauty is a fine balance, or even better, a precise proportion. All the things worth having, such as health and beauty and happiness and virtue, are all, without exception, things produced by a particular proportion between different things. It's said of a newborn baby with affection that he has his mother's eyes, with tolerance that he has his father's nose, with faint alarm that he has his great uncle's jaw. But even if his mother were as beautiful as Helen of Troy, her eyes would not make him as beautiful as Paris or Apollo. Beauty in a face depends on how the eyes and the other features fit in with each other. And if all is devastated by Uncle Humphrey's jaw, the result will be disastrous, even if Uncle Humphrey himself was very handsome, though trying. For these harmonies, which we human beings value, beauty or virtue or all the rest, they do indeed form part of the ultimate purpose of God, but they do not form a part of what may be called the obvious and ostensible purpose of nature. All the features have to be in the right proportion, in the right place to make a beautiful face. What has gone wrong in some manner in the face that is not beautiful is the tendency to achieve proportions. There's been too much of something, too little of something else, the combination necessary for normal activity thrown out of balance. The son of a sane man is often mad because he has the right scruples in the wrong place. The son of a handsome man is often ugly because he has the right features on the wrong face. Chesterton says, proportion is the principle not only of beauty, but of all reality. And this distinction between the dance and the race is why Chesterton says he belongs to the cult of proportion as opposed to the cult of progress. When things are in their right proportion, there's no point in going further. We don't say onward when we're on the end of a precipice, right? We have to find the right place to be. It's what Chesterton calls the crisis of perfection. The crisis of perfection. You should write that on the tablecloth there. Write crisis of perfection. And that way, when they clean up afterwards, they say, yeah, that's what this night was. We reached the crisis of perfection. I'm so glad someone wrote that on the tablecloth. Beauty appeals to the senses, to the emotions, and that's how it gets to the intellect. Modern art tries to appeal directly to the intellect by bypassing the senses and the emotions. That's why when we look at modern art, our first reaction is, well, what's that? What does that mean? What's it supposed to do? It just creates confusion and sometimes repulsion. And we're told, well, that's because you don't know how to interpret it. So we are presented with an art critic who tells us what it means. And then we go, I knew that. The emperor has no clothes. Great, timeless, classical, romantic art strikes us with its beauty. When we look at it, it appeals to our senses, and then it appeals back to all our senses all at once, and then the truth sinks in subtly and wonderfully. When I say wonderfully, it does create wonder. It makes us wonder at something larger than ourselves. It makes us wonder at creation itself, at a heavenly presence. In other words, beauty does not merely appeal to the senses, it enters through the senses. It has a sacramental quality to it. There's more to beauty than beauty. And the true artist, the artist who transcends time, is driven by this ache to find some sense, some story in beautiful things. And he looks at everything with a careful eye, and he has a hunger for its secrets. He will not let any tower or tree escape him with its tale untold. Every true artist feels that he's touching truths which transcend the here and now, that his images are shadows of things seen through the veil. He knows that there's something there, something behind the clouds or within the trees, and he believes that the pursuit of beauty is the way to find it, that imagination is a sort of incantation that can call it up. But a man cannot have the energy to produce good art without having the energy to wish to pass beyond it. The small artist is content with art. The great artist is content with nothing except everything. Chesterton says, you never work so well for art's sake until you are working for something else. Have you ever heard the term Catholic taste? Not anymore. It used to be a term people used. He has very Catholic taste. It has nothing to do with the Catholic Church. It's the small c. It means he has very wide and universal taste. When I say it doesn't have anything to do with the Catholic Church, it has everything to do with the Catholic Church. Because there's something inside Catholic beauty. Because there's something romantic in beauty. And the word Rome is inside the word romantic. The church has all the elements of beauty. It has the passion, it has the appeal, the story, the romance, the adventure, the anticipation, the celebration, the symbols, and the symbols. The comfort, the quiet, the truth that transcends time. And it also has that thing that Chester says is essential to beauty. It has perfect balance and precise proportion. And this may not be evident at all times. It may not be evident when we look at the church, but it's sometimes evident when we look everywhere else. The balance and proportion of the church is most evident when it is compared to the heresies that spin out of it. Because every heresy is simply a virtue that has gone wild, a virtue that is out of balance with the rest of the virtues, that starts to do war with the rest of the virtues. Every heresy is a truth out of proportion. The heretics at first like Chesterton because he recognizes their truth. They like him less when they discover that he also recognizes the truth that they don't recognize. He's not only a complete thinker, he has everything in its place in its proper proportion. And he argues that Christianity does the one thing that paganism could not do. It reconciles the two lobes of the brain, the one that dreams and the one that calculates, the one that loves and the one that laughs. And he's one of the few writers who does the same thing, who combines imagination with reason, and who combines with what is very solemn with what is very funny. Chester says the opposite of funny is not serious. The opposite of funny is not funny. You can be serious and funny at the same time. And that actually is inviting. It makes the truth more inviting when you realize that the key to sanity, says Chesterton, is to have comedy in your head and tragedy in your heart. You have to always keep compassion, but you have to always be able to have enough intellectual remoteness to laugh. Because if you don't, you will go insane if you forget to laugh. We expect a good religion to bring us to our knees. But it's the test of a good religion, Chesterton says, if we can joke about it. Because only truth can stand the strain. But I'm not going to tell the joke that I have written here. The sense of proportion applies to property also. Everyone should have property, because proper is what is proper. But they should not have a disproportionate amount of property. This is part of Chesterton's complete thinking. Property is also about creativity. It's the idea that everyone should be entitled to the raw material enough to carve out of it whatever he chooses to make. So, It's true that beauty gets argued about. We know that. And when people will say, well, there's no disputing taste, they start arguing about taste. We show you can dispute about taste. In fact, they want to dispute about it. They want to have a good argument about it. But most arguments descend into quarrels, and they don't become very constructive. And we may have personal preferences, personal likes and dislikes, and that are really impossible to argue about. But they are really only about minor things, about the glory of variety that God has made. We cannot let this argument apply to greater things like truth itself. Truth is not subjective to taste. Truth is not subjective at all. Truth is objective. Goodness is objective. It's either good or it's not. It's not up to us to decide. And so is beauty objective. It's either beautiful or it's not, and there are objective standards for beauty. And it's great to watch young people in philosophy classes discuss this very point about whether or not beauty is objective or subjective. But as Chesterton says, beauty is unanswerable. Beauty by itself wins the argument because everyone recognizes it. Now, my son Julian, when he was here as a student, made a documentary film once, going around interviewing people, professors, even the President O'Donnell, and people on the street, waitresses and so forth, asking if beauty should be removed from the transcendentals. Should beauty no longer be one of the transcendentals? And of course, for some people, they didn't know what the heck he was talking about. And for some of the professors, they just kind of went, what? But then someone would try to play along with the joke. Yeah, there's an argument for why beauty should be removed from the transcendentals. It was very humorous to watch the different reactions, man on the street interviews. But what strikes me coming back now in 2025 and seeing these nice little grab bags that you've handed out, it looks like you've removed goodness as one of the transcendentals. You just got a conference here on beauty and truth. What happened to goodness? You lost it, huh? That's interesting to me. I think it'd be interesting to the founder and to the trustees. Beauty is unanswerable. Beauty is holy. Holiness is beautiful. The saints have beautiful lives because they have holy lives, but because they have romantic lives. They have passionate lives. Chesterton says that St. Francis was a poet whose whole life was a poem. The saints truly have perfect proportion. The big things are big and the small things are small. Everything is in its proper place. That's the recipe for beauty and for holiness. What is beautiful in your life? What is not beautiful? What is out of proportion? Are the big things big enough in your life? Are the small things small enough? Make a list of what are the big things in your life. Should be God, the church, your vocation, your family, your spouse. Those are the big things. The small things, money, food, sports, cars, computers. Justice is a big thing. Politics are a small thing. Think of all the things in your life. Figure out which list they're on right now and which list they're supposed to be on. There's nothing wrong with the small things, and we should be thankful for them, but they have to be on the right list. They have to be in proper proportion to the big things. And one of the biggest things is a small thing. Chesterton says, babies are the most beautiful things on earth. So I'm going to say finally now, because those are the most welcome words in any speech. finally. I'm going to give you a finally, because the quote I'm going to give you starts with the word finally, which means I have to end it here. But it's not from Chesterton. Now that's strange. But there are a few other writers that I read. This one is named St. Paul. Wrote some letters. This is from one of his letters. Finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is gracious, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. God bless you. Thank you for inviting me.